In the deepest shadows of the Imperium, there is a singular vision that haunts the collective memory of humanity. The sight of a saint, revered and beloved, suddenly wreathed in unearthly flames, their very body burning with a light not of this world. It is a vision at once magnificent and terrifying, the ultimate paradox. Beauty forged in agony, hope wrapped in horror, the promise of the divine swallowed whole by the fire of the warp. Those who witness it never forget. They speak of a silence so profound, it feels like the universe itself is holding its breath as skin and soul ignite, and the air thickens with the impossible perfume of burnt sanctity. What makes these martyrs choose, or endure, such an ending? Why, in the hour of their greatest need, do some saints not stand unbroken, but instead explode into incandescent ruin? To glimpse the answer is to peer into the abyss at the heart of Imperial faith, and perhaps to understand the secret cost of believing in miracles at the edge of damnation. Throughout the Imperium, saints stand as living miracles, woven into the heart of the human mythos like golden threads in a tattered banner. They are not mere paragons of virtue or skilled commanders on the battlefield. They are avatars of hope for a civilization teetering on the brink, reminders that the Emperor's gaze still sweeps across a forsaken galaxy. Every shrine world, every battered cathedral tells the stories of these chosen few, men and women who, for reasons never fully understood, become the very focal points of faith. There is a yearning in the eyes of the faithful when they speak of saints, as if these holy figures might step down from their stained glass or stone and reach into the dirt and blood of reality to bring salvation. For the ecclesiarchy, saints are both weapons and wards, tools to reinforce the collective will, symbols to keep heresy at bay, and sometimes an uncomfortable reminder of powers that lie far beyond mortal understanding or control. From childhood, citizens of the Imperium are taught to venerate saints almost as fiercely as the Emperor himself. Their names become battle cries, their deeds recited as prayers. This veneration is not passive, it is charged with desperation and longing. In a universe so pitiless, the need for a sign, a physical burning embodiment of the divine, can border on obsession. Saints fulfill this hunger, standing as the last defense against cosmic horror, the proof that humanity can be more than chattel in the jaws of monsters. When a saint walks among the masses, their every gesture is scrutinized, every word becomes scripture, and their mere presence is seen as a blessing that justifies the suffering of an entire world. Yet, the weight of sainthood is a curse as much as a gift. To be a saint is to become the vessel for collective expectation, the living canvas for billions of hopes and traumas. These figures carry the scars of their worshippers as surely as their own wounds. Each Imperial saint bears a legend, a litany of miracles and hardships. They are expected to heal, to fight, to lead, to die, and rise again in the name of the Emperor. The pressure is unbearable, turning their lives into public acts of penance and sacrifice. Sometimes the faith of the people is so intense, it threatens to consume the saint entirely, not just spiritually, but physically. There are those who argue that this fervor itself is a psychic force, stoking the fires that ultimately burn their champions alive, and it is within this crucible that the seeds of their self-destruction are sown. The saint is more than flesh and blood. They are myth, memory, aspiration, and, at times, scapegoat. The people need them to burn, if only to prove, even for a moment, that something untainted by the universe's malice can exist, if only to vanish in a final blaze of glory. The agony of their end, the warp-tainted pyres, becomes the climax of the myth, a confirmation that suffering has purpose and that even annihilation can be radiant if endured for the Emperor's sake. This is the terrible price of sainthood in the Imperium, a price paid in hope, in horror, and in holy flame. There is a secret current that runs beneath the cathedral cities and hive spires of the Imperium, an invisible tide of psychic energy that ebbs and surges with every prayer and scream. Saints, Those rare souls who seem to walk with the Emperor's shadow at their shoulder are the greatest lightning rods for this power. To understand why some are consumed in Warpfire, one must look not only to their flesh, but to the strange, treacherous relationship between faith and the warp itself. The warp is a realm of pure emotion and thought, shaped by the dreams and nightmares of the living. It is a place where gods are born from belief and demons feast on suffering. For the Imperium, it is both a source of miracle and horror, and the saints exist precisely at the knife's edge where those two realities meet. It is tempting to imagine the Emperors chosen as untouched by the warp, as beings entirely wrapped in the light of the Master of Mankind, but the truth is far stranger and more dangerous. Saints are not isolated from the warp, they are saturated by it. The faith of billions is a psychic beacon, calling forth powers both wondrous and perilous. The act of veneration, the endless litanies and sacrifices, do not merely honor the saint, they bind them to the tides of psychic force that swirl through the materium. The Emperor's power, so the ecclesiarchy proclaims, can burn away corruption and shield the soul, but it is still power channeled through the unreliability of human minds and hearts. Sometimes the act of channeling becomes a crucible, and the vessel is destroyed by what it was meant to contain. The warp is never still. The stronger the faith, the greater the risk. Saints often perform miracles that defy the laws of physics, healing the mortally wounded, banishing demons with a gesture, or walking unscathed through the heart of battle. These acts, seen by the faithful as evidence of divine intervention, are often psychic phenomena, manifestations of will, belief, and the dangerous interface with the immaterium. The brighter the miracle, the more it warps reality around it, sometimes in ways that are impossible to control. At their most powerful, saints teeter on the edge of demonhood, saved from damnation only by the purity of their intent and the unwavering adulation of their followers. It is a dance on a razor's edge, one misstep away from utter annihilation. Within the Imperium, the warp-born immolation of a saint is rarely treated as an accident or mere psychic backlash. It is mythologized, studied, and feared in equal measure. Some whisper that in their last moments, these saints achieve such a perfect resonance with the Emperor's light that their mortal frames cannot contain it. Others, more cynical or heretical, claim the warp itself reaches through to consume those whose souls blaze too brightly, as if the immaterial is jealous of their radiance. To the Inquisition, it is a phenomenon to be surveilled, a potential threat wrapped in the most dangerous kind of devotion. For every saint who becomes a radiant martyr, there are doubtless others lost to the madness of uncontrolled psychic overload, never canonized, their stories erased by ecclesiarchal decree. What is left, then, is a legacy of fire and ashes. The people see the burning and weep, believing it proof that the Emperor's love is so fierce it can set souls alight. They are not wrong, but they are not wholly right either. The truth is more complicated, more tragic, and more awe-inspiring than any dogma dares to admit. To be a saint is to be a living paradox, at once the Emperor's vessel and the warp's plaything, a miracle and a warning, burning brightly until there is nothing left but memory, legend, and smoke. There is a moment, subtle at first, that stalks the footsteps of every Imperial saint, the quiet escalation of phenomena that marks the build-up to a supernatural immolation. From the outside, it appears as a gradual intensification, a growing luminosity in the saint's presence, an aura thickening like summer haze, whispers of visions and ecstasies spreading among their followers. Those closest to these figures often describe a sense of anticipation that goes beyond mere religious awe. The air itself becomes charged, prayers come unbidden to the lips, and sometimes even the inanimate world seems to bend in response. Icons weep blood, shadows flicker against natural law, and the scent of incense clings stubbornly to the skin long after the liturgy's end. Inside the mind of the saint, the escalation is more harrowing. The psychic and spiritual pressures converge, creating a symphony of visions both glorious and terrifying. Some saints, like Sabbat or Drusus, have been said to walk for days without sleep, sustained only by rapture and the Emperor's grace, seeing the past and future superimposed over the present. These visions are not gentle revelations. They are storms of memory, prophecy, and despair, washing over the saint until the boundaries of self begin to blur. Many report moments where the saint's voice takes on an unnatural resonance, echoing with hidden harmonics, as if their words are spoken by 1,000 tongues at once. At the apex of this mounting ecstasy, the saint is no longer an individual, but an intersection of human longing, the Emperor's will, and the dangerous tides of the warp. The people drawn into the orbit of such saints can sense the change, even if they lack the words for it. Pilgrims fall to their knees, overcome by tears and laughter in equal measure. Soldiers who would otherwise flinch in terror stand unflinching as their saint walks into the thick of war, the banners of the enemy smoldering at their feet. The buildup is almost always attended by omens, storms that refuse to break, animals fleeing shrines, machines stuttering inexplicably. There is a collective sense that something is coming, something that cannot be averted by reason or ritual. In this crucible of anticipation, faith is both tested and transformed. In the moments immediately before the immolation, time seems to stretch and fracture. Those nearby recount the sensation of being held in place, as if by invisible hands, unable to look away no matter how overwhelming the spectacle becomes. The saint, meanwhile, may appear utterly calm or racked by ecstatic agony. Some smile in their final moments, their faces illuminated from within, while others scream, their voices lost in a cacophony of raw, unfiltered emotion. There is no uniformity to the way these burnings unfold. Each is unique, shaped by the saint's own fears, desires, and burdens. Yet beneath the outward differences lies a common thread, the transformation of ordinary suffering into a public, supernatural ordeal. Ecclesiarchal scholars sometimes argue that this crescendo of visions and pain is the price of channeling the Emperor's will. The psychic buildup is both a blessing and a curse, a necessary stage in the saint's journey from mortal to martyr. Yet even the most dogmatic priest cannot ignore the terror in these moments, the way faith curdles into something sublime and monstrous. There are whispers in the more heretical circles of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica that saints are unwitting psychers, that their visions are nothing but the warp itself, forcing a kind of catastrophic resonance. If true, this would mean their deaths are not mere acts of will or divine favor, but the inevitable collapse of a soul pushed past every conceivable limit. For the average witness, however, none of this matters in the moment. They see only the unfolding miracle, the terrible beauty of flesh alight, and the certain knowledge that history has pivoted on the axis of a single, incandescent life. In the build-up to immolation, the line between blessing and curse, between faith and madness, vanishes in the glow of a miracle too bright for mortal eyes to endure. There is a knife-edge quality to the self-destruction of saints, a question that claws at the heart of every believer. Is this the ultimate benediction or a dire malediction? Martyrdom in the Imperium is never just a simple death. When a saint is engulfed in Warpfire, their destruction is seen by some as the Emperor's final blessing, a miracle so intense that mortal flesh cannot bear it, proof of sanctity so absolute that even the laws of reality must bend and break in its wake. For others, especially in the hush of shadowed cloisters and forbidden texts, it is whispered that what appears holy might instead be the result of powers far darker, a curse woven by the warp and disguised as a blessing. The agony of this ambiguity is nowhere clearer than in the stories of saints whose deaths defy all categories. There are tales of men and women who, in the final moments of their lives, radiated such unearthly brilliance that whole armies fell to their knees, enemies and allies alike paralyzed by awe and terror. When Saint Marivia was consumed on the battlefield of Haxalon, it was said that her scream split the heavens, and the fire that devoured her left behind not ruin but a scorched symbol on the earth, marking the very spot as hallowed for generations. The ecclesiarchy proclaims such events as irrefutable evidence of the emperor's direct intervention, a soul so pure it becomes fuel for the holy, its martyrdom burning away the stain of chaos and despair. But not every burning is so easily sanctified. There are accounts buried deep in the archives of saints who died in ways far less beautiful. Some raged as the fire consumed them, writhing in torment that seemed to mirror the howling of the warp itself. There are even those whose death throws unleashed psychic shockwaves so violent that they left not healing but madness in their wake, entire congregations struck blind, faith curdled into fanaticism or despair. The question haunts every theologian. Is the saint's destruction an act of divine will, or a sign that they have been touched by forces too dangerous to fully comprehend? Within the ecclesiarchy, these cases are debated endlessly, sometimes behind closed doors, sometimes in the open. For every choir that sings of the cleansing fire, there are inquisitors who dig for evidence of corruption or warp taint, unwilling to accept that every miracle is entirely pure. The faithful are caught in the middle, desperate to believe that suffering has meaning, that even in destruction there is a kind of transcendence. They cling to the idea that martyrdom is always a gift, even when its aftermath feels more like a wound than a healing. In the legends passed from mouth to mouth across the Imperium, the lines blur further. Pilgrims speak of saints who chose the fire willingly, stepping into the pyre as a final act of faith. Others tell stories of those who seemed almost surprised by their own destruction, as if something alien had slipped the leash inside them and burned its way out. In either case, the result is the same, a spectacle that forces everyone who sees it to reconsider what it means to be blessed and what it means to be cursed. The Emperor's favor is rarely straightforward. Sometimes it appears as a healing touch, sometimes as a consuming blaze. In the end, it is the ambiguity that gives these stories their power. The saint's destruction is not just a narrative of good and evil, of reward and punishment. It is a testament to the terrible complexity of faith in a universe where miracles and horrors wear the same mask. Whether martyrdom or malediction, the burning of a saint remains a wound in reality itself, a reminder that to serve the divine is to risk everything, even one's own soul, on the altar of belief. There is a strange, almost seductive beauty in the suffering of saints, a beauty that lies not in the agony itself, but in the way that agony is transformed by faith into something transcendent. The Imperium does not flinch from pain. Rather, it sanctifies it, sculpting every wound and scar into symbols of devotion and proof of righteousness. Within the culture of the ecclesiarchy and its billions of followers, the spectacle of a saint burning in Warpfire becomes more than just a moment of horror. It is elevated into an aesthetic of holy suffering, a tableau where agony is recast as a sacred act, its violence veiled in the golden light of martyrdom. From the smallest shrine world to the towering cathedrals of Terra, the image of the burning saint is carved into stone and glass, painted in sacred oils, and sung about in hymns. The suffering of these figures is retold with almost loving attention to detail, the contortions of the body, the shouts and songs of the witnesses, the way the flames dance in impossible patterns, sometimes blue, sometimes gold, sometimes the deep, sinister red of the immaterial. The Imperium finds purpose in this pain, teaching its citizens that to suffer in the name of the Emperor is not merely to endure, but to become something greater. This is not passive resignation. It is the very foundation of the Imperial Creed, where beauty and brutality are eternally intertwined. The adoration of holy agony extends even to the relics left behind, a scrap of scorched cloth, a bone charred black, a handful of ashes. These are objects of pilgrimage, talismans believed to heal, to guide, or to grant a momentary taste of the saint's spiritual ecstasy. In some cases, entire schisms have erupted over who controls such relics, as their perceived power and sanctity can draw millions to a single world, reshaping its destiny in a wave of piety and desperation. The stories told by pilgrims and priests alike speak to a longing for transformation through suffering, a belief that to witness or even touch these relics is to come closer to the divine agony of the martyr. The cult of holy suffering is not without its critics, though such dissent is often whispered only in the most private of confessions. Some see a dangerous pathology in this love of pain, a sickness that feeds on the misery of the faithful and warps their empathy into fanaticism. They question whether the sanctification of agony leads only to greater cruelty, whether it blinds the Imperium to the horror of what it demands from its most beloved children. Yet, for every doubter, there are 1,000 more who find hope in the suffering of saints. They see in these agonies the Emperor's love and the ultimate victory of spirit over flesh. For the saints themselves, this aesthetic is both a crown and a shackle. Their pain is made public, their deaths transformed into a spectacle that defines entire generations. Some saints are said to accept their fate with joy, convinced that each scream is a prayer, each tear a blessing. Others are haunted by dread, knowing that their suffering will be retold and relived endlessly by those who come after. In either case, the burning saint stands at the heart of the Imperial imagination, a figure of radiant pain whose suffering promises not only redemption, but a kind of terrible beauty, proof that in the Imperium, even annihilation can become an act of worship. On the battlefields of the Imperium, where hope is often measured in meters of mud and blood, saints are wielded not just as symbols, but as living weapons. Their presence can galvanize broken armies, instill fear in the hearts of the heretic, and alter the very trajectory of a war. Yet the act of self-destruction, the final blazing martyrdom of a saint, is more than just a spiritual event. It becomes a tactical force, a cataclysm that reshapes everything around it, burning away the boundaries between miracle and military doctrine. To witness a saint combust in the heat of conflict is to see the raw, terrifying alchemy of faith and violence at work, an explosion that can shatter the morale of the Emperor's foes and rally his faithful to superhuman feats. Commanders across the Imperial Guard, the Sisters of Battle, and even some Space Marine chapters know well the power of saintly presence. There are stories of demoralized regiments turning the tide after seeing a saint walk through the hellfire unscathed, until that final, irreversible moment when their mortal form erupts in Warpfire. The psychic shockwave that accompanies such a death can be as deadly as any artillery barrage. Heretics and demons alike have been witnessed recoiling, driven mad, or outright destroyed by the unleashed power. The faithful, meanwhile, find themselves electrified, as if the saint's immolation burns away all doubt and fear, leaving only pure devotion in its wake. There is an undeniable violence to this miracle, and the Imperium is never slow to weaponize it. Ecclesiarchal preachers and ministorum tacticians alike have learned to shape entire campaigns around the presence, or even the rumored presence, of a living saint. Stories spread quickly among the ranks, and sometimes the mere possibility that a saint might self-destruct in the name of the Emperor is enough to force an enemy retreat or inspire a desperate last stand. In certain rare whispered cases, saints themselves have been urged, subtly or directly, to embrace their own destruction, to let their martyrdom become the final, unanswerable argument in the face of overwhelming darkness. The consequences of such a sacrifice do not end with the saint's death. The place where a burning occurs becomes a living relic, a psychic scar on the landscape. Soldiers return to the site, sometimes years later, seeking a fragment of ash or a glimpse of lingering glory. Battles are fought to control these locations, as both the Imperium and its enemies recognize the lasting power that radiates from the spot where a saint was consumed. The ground is often said to be haunted by visions, by miracles, by the echo of the saint's agony and triumph. This militarization of martyrdom is not without risk or controversy. Some question whether the pressure placed on saints to deliver ever greater miracles and ever more spectacular deaths is just another form of imperial cruelty, a cynical calculus of faith and flesh. Yet, in the darkness of war, the Imperium has little time for hesitation. It is a civilization built on the bones of its martyrs, and nowhere is this clearer than on the front lines, where the boundary between faith and weapon is incinerated in a single apocalyptic blaze. The saints who burn in battle are remembered in songs, in shrines, and in the names of regiments who take up their cause. Their final moments are not simply personal tragedies, but pivotal acts of war, moments that fuse the spiritual and the strategic, and remind both the Imperium and its enemies that the Emperor's wrath can descend in forms more terrifying than any blade or bolter. To fight alongside a saint is to stand in the presence of the miraculous. To witness their self-destruction is to be marked forever, scorched by the proof that even in death, the faithful can remake the world with fire. Suspicion is a shadow that never leaves the heart of the Imperium, even in its moments of greatest triumph. For every saint who burns in a blaze of supposed sanctity, there are whispers of heresy, of false miracles and warp-tainted flames masquerading as divine light. The line between holiness and corruption is razor-thin, and nowhere is this more terrifying than in the spectacle of self-immolation. Inquisitors and confessors walk a perpetual tightrope, tasked with discerning genuine martyrdom from the subtle machinations of chaos. The stakes are nothing less than the soul of humanity itself, for to mistake a warp-spawned curse for a blessing is to risk the damnation of entire worlds. It is not just external enemies that threaten the purity of the Imperial faith. The danger lies equally within. Some saints, canonized too quickly or embraced by the desperate masses, later become objects of controversy as their miracles are re-examined and their final moments dissected. There are cases, buried in forbidden archives and denied by the ecclesiarchy, of saints whose burning was accompanied by phenomena far too similar to demon manifestations. Voices not their own, sigils scorched into the earth that matched heretical scripts, or after effects that drove witnesses mad rather than strengthening their faith. When such cases come to light, the Inquisition acts with ferocious secrecy. Sometimes the remains are destroyed, the relics quietly lost, the cults surrounding these dubious saints dispersed or purged. The official histories are rewritten, the memory of the burning saint transformed into a cautionary tale or erased altogether. This creates an atmosphere of paranoia that infects even the most sincere acts of worship. For the average pilgrim, the distinction between true miracle and warp-fueled horror is impossible to parse. They must trust in the authority of the ecclesiarchy to guide their faith. Yet that same authority is constantly on guard, searching for signs of deception or corruption. The Ministorum deploys theologians and sanctioned psychers to investigate reported miracles, sometimes arriving at scenes only to find little left but ash, terror, and rumor. Inquisitorial agents work in secret, sifting through testimonies, silencing those whose doubt grows too loud. Even the faithful who have witnessed a burning sometimes find themselves under suspicion, their loyalty tested in brutal interrogations. This perpetual climate of doubt leaves scars across the collective psyche of the Imperium. In some regions, entire communities have been declared heretical simply for venerating the wrong martyr, their towns razed, their names struck from the record. The cult of saints, meant to unite the faithful, can thus become a wedge that drives them apart, with schisms and purges following in the wake of every controversial burning. Pilgrims journey in fear as much as in hope, knowing that the very miracle they seek might be the prelude to accusation and annihilation. Yet, for all the danger, the devotion of the masses remains unbroken. Some even court the suspicion, believing that suffering under the gaze of the Inquisition is itself a mark of favor, a trial that will draw them closer to the Emperor. Others become zealots, ruthlessly hunting any sign of false faith among their peers, turning the culture of suspicion into a crucible that burns away doubt, but sometimes also compassion. The cycle repeats endlessly: the burning of a saint, the spread of fervor, the creeping rise of doubt, and the hammer of retribution. In the Imperium, faith and paranoia are two sides of the same coin, and nowhere is this more evident than in the aftermath of saints consumed by suspicious, spectacular flames. For the ordinary people of the Imperium, the burning of a saint is not an event that happens far away, filtered through the cold language of ecclesiarchal record or the feverish poetry of hagiography. It is lived, raw, and immediate, a wound in the fabric of daily life. Pilgrims, guardsmen, adepts, and children find themselves drawn, sometimes by chance, sometimes by fate, to witness the moment when a human soul is set ablaze by forces incomprehensible. These witnesses carry the scars of what they have seen for the rest of their lives. Some become zealots, forever changed by the vision of sanctity made flesh and fire. Others are left shaken, haunted, their faith curdled into fear, their dreams echoing with the screams and the unnatural light that devoured a living legend before their eyes. The stories that spread in the aftermath are never the same. On one world, a witness claims that the burning saint smiled at him, eyes bright with love and forgiveness, even as her skin split and the flames consumed her. On another, a survivor mutters that he saw nothing holy in the inferno, only terror, only pain, and a sense that the air itself was thick with the presence of something watching, something neither angelic nor damned but entirely alien. For every tale of healing miracles and joyous conversions, there are rumors of spontaneous madness, of crowds driven to wild, orgiastic weeping, of mothers clawing at the ashes in a futile attempt to find meaning in the charred remains. Entire communities may rally around the memory, turning a field of soot into a shrine that draws pilgrims from across the sector. These makeshift holy places are crowded with relic hunters, penitents, and hopefuls who wish to touch even the smallest trace of the transcendent. The faith of the masses is not delicate. It is desperate, hungry for evidence that suffering has purpose. Some come seeking healing, others forgiveness or strength, but all are changed by the act of standing where the impossible occurred. Even those who do not believe are drawn by curiosity or dread, compelled to see for themselves what happens when the border between mortal and miraculous is erased. Yet the aftermath is as often marked by trauma as by faith. The ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition move quickly to control the narrative, sending preachers and minders to shape public memory, to spin the event as an unambiguous miracle and suppress any hint of the uncanny or the disturbing. Witnesses are interviewed, sometimes comforted, sometimes threatened, sometimes simply disappeared. Those who speak too freely, who suggest that the burning felt wrong or left them with more fear than faith, are quietly silenced or sent on penitent pilgrimages from which they do not return. The process of collective remembering becomes a struggle between genuine experience and imposed orthodoxy. Murals are painted, songs composed, miracles attributed to the ashes, all while the undercurrent of unease persists. Over generations, the details shift and blur. What began as a moment of horror and awe is polished into legend, the pain sanded away, the strangeness explained, until only the glow of holiness remains. But in the private moments of prayer, in the sleepless hours of the night, there are always those who remember what it truly felt like to watch a saint burn, the mixture of hope and dread, love and terror, and the absolute certainty that something had changed forever. For these witnesses and pilgrims, the burning of a saint is not a story but a wound, a memory as inescapable as a scar. Their voices, fragmented and contradictory, add texture to the myth, and keep alive the terrible, beautiful ambiguity that haunts every miracle in the Imperium. It is through their eyes that the legend is made real, and through their pain that the burning saint's flame continues to smolder in the hearts of the faithful. In the labyrinthine web of Imperial history, the truth about saints is as elusive as it is powerful. The stories of burning saints are a patchwork of dogma, legend, rumor, and pure invention, a living testament to the Imperium's refusal to let uncertainty stand in the way of faith. Official canon records only the most acceptable burnings, those that fit neatly into the ecclesiarchy's narrative of sacrifice and holy fire. Yet, for every story inscribed in a cathedral's vault or proclaimed from the pulpit, There are dozens more whispered among the faithful, exchanged in shadowy corners and on desperate pilgrimages. Fan theories blossom in the cracks between sanctioned miracle and unexplained tragedy, trying to bridge the chasm left by silence and censorship. Some Imperial saints, such as Sabbat or Celestine, become figures of nearly uncontested veneration, their miraculous survival or resurrection treated as proof that the Emperor still walks among his people. The details of their holy burnings are curated with care, each act of immolation described as an unquestionable miracle, each witness report scoured for heresy or doubt. But what of the saints who simply vanish, or who die in ways so strange and inexplicable that the ecclesiarchy cannot or will not offer an explanation? There are stories of saints who dissolved into light, who were torn apart by invisible forces, or who appeared to combust without any warning, their bodies leaving behind no relics, only legends. These spontaneous saints become the heart of 1,000 wild theories and folk traditions. The lack of a uniform pattern haunts both the laity and the learned. Some saints burn to ash, others vanish without a trace, while a few seem to pass peacefully, their bodies untouched by any miraculous sign. Is this difference a measure of their faith, the whim of the Emperor, or the unpredictable touch of the warp? The official answer is always that which best serves the needs of the ecclesiarchy at the time, a flexibility that allows new legends to take root wherever doubt might otherwise fester. In the cold logic of the administratum, the inexplicable is either ignored or recast as another facet of the divine mystery, a reminder that the Emperor's will is inscrutable. Yet, for the people who hunger for meaning, the patchwork nature of saintly lore is an open invitation to speculation. Some insist that the saints who burn are those closest to the Emperor, consumed by his love in their final moments. Others argue that such deaths are warnings, not blessings, a sign that the warp itself can claim even the most devout. There are tales of false saints, whose self-immolation is orchestrated by cults or psychers seeking to sow chaos. In contrast, there are fan theories that saints who fade without spectacle are spared the suffering of their peers because they have already achieved a perfect union with the divine, their passage unnoticed only by those blind to subtle miracles. Canon and legend are locked in a perpetual dance, each shaping and reshaping the other as new saints rise and old stories are retold. It is this dance that gives the phenomenon of burning saints its enduring power. The uncertainty and contradiction are not flaws, but essential elements, fuel for faith, but also for doubt, and for the endless creativity of a population forever seeking to make sense of the universe's cruelties and wonders. The question of why some saints self-destruct while others simply pass into memory will never be answered, not in any way that satisfies both the scholar and the believer. In the end, it is the very mystery of spontaneous sainthood that keeps the legend alive, a living fire in the heart of the Imperium, consuming certainty and leaving behind only faith. The debate over the meaning of burning saints rages as fiercely as the fires that consume them. Within the Imperium's endless halls of faith and skepticism, arguments fly like last bolts. Is the spontaneous combustion of a saint a sign of the Emperor's ultimate will, a deliberate act of divine favor that transforms mortal agony into unanswerable proof? Or is it a cruel accident, a byproduct of psychic overload and the dangerous currents of the warp, something random, perhaps even malevolent, masquerading as miracle? There is no single answer, only the ferocious conviction of those who stake their souls on one side or the other. To many priests and most of the faithful, there can be no doubt. The Emperor, shrouded in myth and silence upon his golden throne, chooses his saints to be vessels of his love and wrath. When a saint burns, it is seen as the pinnacle of favor, a soul too radiant to survive in the broken husk of a human body, the flesh annihilated so that the light may shine unimpeded. This conviction offers comfort and certainty in a universe defined by chaos. For these believers, the unpredictable nature of the event is not a flaw, but a sign of the Emperor's inscrutability, the paradox at the heart of faith. One must believe, especially when the reason for belief is wrapped in terror. Yet, there are those, often in secret, who propose a grimmer interpretation. In the orphanages of the Schola Progenium, among the sanctioned psychers of the Astra Telepathica, and in the haunted silence of the Inquisition's libraries, some dare to suggest that the phenomenon is neither intentional nor benevolent. They point to cases where a saint's burning coincides with warp disturbances, with nightmares that ripple out across entire sectors, or with outbreaks of madness and mutation. In these whispers, the warp is not a tool of the Emperor, but a predator that feeds on faith, drawn to the psychic bonfire of collective belief. The burning, in this reading, is a psychic overload, a side effect of channeling too much raw power, or a trap set by dark forces eager to devour souls masquerading as holy. Some fan theorists go further still, arguing that both realities are true at once, in a way only the Immaterium could allow. The Emperor's will and the warp's whim are locked in eternal struggle, each event a collision point where faith and chaos blur into one another. In this vision, the saint's death is not a pure victory or defeat, but a moment of cosmic tension, a flashpoint where the destiny of the soul is decided anew. The flames that consume are both blessing and curse, a crucible that forges legends and leaves behind only questions. The emotional resonance of these arguments cannot be overstated. For some, the ambiguity is an agony, an open wound that festers into doubt, driving people to heresy or despair. For others, the very lack of certainty is what sustains faith, proof that the universe is vast and mysterious, that true devotion must burn in the absence of easy answers. Among the faithful, there is often a quiet acceptance of this tension. To witness a saint burn is to brush against the unknowable, to realize that the Emperor's hand and the warp's claws may look, for a single blinding instant, exactly the same. In the end, the competing perspectives do not cancel each other out. They coexist, feeding the endless churn of stories, sermons, and private fears. The truth, if it exists at all, is a secret kept by the flames themselves, a secret that will outlast the Imperium, echoing on in the hearts of those who choose to believe, even as they tremble at the price of faith. In the Imperium, the legacy of burning saints is more than a collection of relics and stories. It is a force that shapes worlds, policies, and even the psychic topography of human space. Each time a saint is consumed by Warpfire, the repercussions ripple outward in ways that cannot be predicted or contained. Political factions within the ecclesiarchy seize upon the event, using the memory of the burning to advance their own agendas, while the Inquisition sifts through the ashes for signs of heresy or opportunity. On a spiritual level, entire worlds have been transformed by the cults that arise in the wake of a martyr's death, their faith intensified by the memory of suffering transfigured into miracle. It is not just the faithful who are changed. The psychic residue of such a death lingers, sometimes for centuries. Astropaths and psychers speak of hot spots, places where the immaterium feels closer, raw, and exposed, as if the saint's passing has burned a permanent scar into the veil that separates reality from the warp. Pilgrims flock to these sites in search of healing or revelation, and stories of spontaneous miracles, healings, visions, sudden ecstasies become part of the region's permanent identity. Some worlds have been remade entirely, their populations united or divided by the memory of what occurred, their economies and social hierarchies rewritten around the cult of the burning saint. But the legacy is not always so positive. The ashes of a saint can sow seeds of fanaticism and violence as easily as hope. Relic cults splinter off, each claiming unique insight or possession of the true remains, and bloody schisms erupt over the right to worship or profit from the legacy. The Inquisition and the Adepta Sororitas are sometimes forced to intervene, declaring certain sites off-limits or purging entire sects when the fervor tips over into heresy or madness. Some burning sites become battlefields in their own right, contested by rival faiths or targeted by the agents of chaos who seek to corrupt what was once holy. The psychic echoes of these events may even draw the attention of entities in the warp, who see in the burning of a saint a moment of weakness, a crack through which they might reach. There are tales of hauntings, of visions that become increasingly disturbing, of pilgrims who disappear or return changed, their eyes alight with something not quite human. The line between miracle and curse blurs further, and the site becomes a crucible for the entire community, a place where faith is both tested and renewed, sometimes at a terrible price. The ashes of burning saints are thus both anchor and powder keg. They stabilize belief for some, even as they destabilize society for others. Ecclesiarchal authorities attempt to channel the legacy into sanctioned forms, declaring feast days, commissioning cathedrals, collecting tithes, but these efforts are only ever partially successful. The raw power of the burning moment resists control, breaking free in unexpected ways, seeding new legends, new cults, new crises. In this way, the burning of a saint is never truly over. Its effects linger, flickering through generations, a living proof that faith is as volatile as the flames that consume its holiest vessels. In the final reckoning, the Imperium is built on the legacy of its martyrs, not just the memory of their suffering, but the living, shifting consequences of their deaths. Burning saints become more than figures in stained glass. They are catalysts for change, for devotion and destruction, for wonder and terror. Their legacy is as complex as the universe itself, luminous, tragic, eternal. Faith in the Imperium is an ember that endures, no matter how many times it is smothered by darkness or kindled by tragedy. The image of the burning saint stands at the very heart of that faith, a vision both haunting and sublime, proof that even in a galaxy torn apart by war and corruption, hope can still erupt in glory, if only for an instant. There is no single lesson to be drawn from the self-destruction of saints. For every believer who finds comfort in the idea of divine intervention, there is another who grapples with doubt, another who sees in the flames only the cruel indifference of the warp. But in every case, the burning is a call, a summons to look beyond the ordinary, to see the potential for both damnation and redemption in every human soul. As the legends continue to grow, retold in the hushed voices of pilgrims and the thunderous sermons of preachers, the Imperium itself is reshaped. Each story of a saint consumed by holy fire becomes another spark in the bonfire of belief, an invitation to embrace the mystery, to endure suffering, to fight on against the encroaching night. In a universe where certainty is impossible and truth is always colored by pain, the choice to believe is itself an act of courage. Saints burn not just because the Emperor wills it, nor because the warp claims them, but because faith, real, desperate, yearning faith, demands proof, even if that proof is agony. The flame consumes, but it also illuminates, offering a fleeting glimpse of the divine in a world otherwise devoid of mercy. So whether you find comfort in the miracle, suspicion in the mystery, or terror in the agony, the story of the burning saint is yours as much as it is the Imperium's. Their suffering is not only a reminder of the Emperor's love or the warp's caprice, but of humanity's endless struggle to find meaning in a universe that seems bent on denying it. In the end, the flames that consume the saints are the same that keep the darkness at bay, a living fire passed from soul to soul that may one day light the way to salvation. Across the endless span of Imperial history, the image of the burning saint has seeped deep into every aspect of culture, becoming far more than a cautionary legend or source of spiritual inspiration. It is a shape that recurs in every form of expression, imprinting itself on the collective mind of humanity with the force of an unshakable obsession. Nowhere is this seen more profoundly than in the arts and the madness that so often walks hand in hand with faith. Sculptors and painters, poets and minstrels all return to this vision again and again, driven by an impulse as powerful as any religious compulsion. In the nightmarish uncertainty of the 41st millennium, the burning saint becomes not just a subject but a muse, a touchstone for those who struggle to find meaning in a universe that recoils from meaning itself. The greatest cathedrals and most wretched underhive shrines alike are festooned with images of saints engulfed in impossible fire. Glasswork shivers in crimson and gold, statues writhe as if captured mid-immolation, and tapestries depict flesh burning away to reveal light, or in some daring works, a darkness so absolute that it eclipses all hope. To artists, the moment of combustion is more than a death. It is a revelation. They strive to capture the agony, the ecstasy, the paradox of beauty and horror that only the burning saint embodies. In some paintings, the flames are gentle, wrapping the saint in a cocoon of grace. In others, they are wild, devouring, the saint's face twisted in a rictus that hints at terror as much as transcendence. This obsession with holy immolation has given rise to entire schools of artistic thought. The so-called Pyrrhian aesthetic prizes works that evoke both awe and dread, fusing themes of sacrifice with the ever-present threat of annihilation. It is not uncommon for artists to slip into states of religious mania while working, claiming to see visions of their own burning, to feel the phantom touch of the flames. Many descend into madness, their minds fractured by the attempt to understand a mystery meant only for the divine. Among these tragic figures, some are later venerated themselves. Martyrs not of battle but of obsession, their art sealed away by the ecclesiarchy, deemed too dangerous for the masses to witness unguarded. The relationship between faith, art, and madness is symbiotic. For every masterpiece that moves the soul to reverence, there is another that sows seeds of doubt and fear, hinting at truths the ecclesiarchy would rather keep buried. The Inquisition and the Adepta Sororitas keep close watch over those who create or display works related to burning saints, ever wary that such images may carry a taint of the warp or inspire heresy instead of piety. Stories persist of sculptures that weep blood, of tapestries that warp in the candlelight, of paintings whose flames seem to move when seen from the corner of the eye. Pilgrims travel light years to glimpse these relics, risking excommunication, or worse, simply for the chance to stand in the presence of the mystery. Yet, art alone cannot contain the power of the burning saint. The phenomenon seeps into dreams and delirium, infecting even those who claim no faith at all. Psychers report visions of fire and song, tormented by nightmares that blend the suffering of saints with their own psychic agony. Some among the Astra Telepathica have come to fear that these visions are not simply madness, but a form of communication, a warning or an invitation from something deeper in the warp. There are cases where entire communities have been stricken with mass hysteria, driven to acts of spontaneous worship or violence after a shared dream of burning, leaving behind towns transformed and memories shattered. This cultural saturation of the burning saint transforms belief itself, constantly evolving the faith of the Imperium in strange and unpredictable ways. For some, the omnipresent imagery breeds cynicism, a sense that the story of martyrdom is just another tool for control. For others, it is an endless well of hope, a reassurance that suffering is not in vain. And for the lost and the mad, it is both, a reminder that the line between miracle and nightmare is as thin as a wisp of smoke, as fleeting as the light of a soul devoured by Warpfire. The burning saint endures because the Imperium needs them to endure. They are an answer to questions that cannot be spoken, a salve for wounds that cannot be healed. Whether captured in paint, echoed in song, or feared in the shadowed corridors of the mind, their legacy is immortal, forever burning, forever reborn. In every act of creation or madness, the saints remind the faithful and the faithless alike that to seek meaning in a universe without mercy is to risk everything, even one's sanity, on the hope that somewhere within the flames, a deeper truth waits to be revealed. If you felt that spark, if you found yourself haunted, inspired, or simply hungry for more stories from the bleeding heart of the 41st millennium, then I invite you to join this channel's ongoing crusade through the mysteries and tragedies of Warhammer 40K lore. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your faith, your questions, and your doubts are the fuel that keeps these stories burning bright. Until next time, remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even the smallest flame can light the way.